Hello, and welcome. Whether you're listening late at night with relaxed eyelids or resting quietly during the day, this gentle journey invites you to drift softly into the past. Settle into a comfortable spot. Let your breath slow. Allow the weight of the day to melt away. Together, we'll step back centuries into the heart of rural Japan, into a world shaped by rhythm, ritual, and resilience. This is You Wouldn't Last a Day as a Peasant in Feudal Japan, a calm, reflective exploration of daily life, far from the courts of samurai and emperors. Take a slow, deep breath. As you exhale, imagine the warm light of dawn spreading over endless rice fields, each leaf shimmering with morning dew. Hear the gentle rustle of wind moving through bamboo groves and the distant call of a rooster greeting the day. In this peaceful retelling, we step away from conflict and instead move at the pace of village life. Simple routines, quiet hardships, and moments of connection that shape generations of people. We walk through history not with urgency, but with soft curiosity. Picture yourself standing on the edge of a small farming village. Wooden homes with thatched roofs line the narrow paths, and smoke curls lazily from cooking fires as families begin their morning tasks. The air carries the earthy scent of soil, rice, straw, and the pure freshness of countryside wind. You may be lying in bed now, safe and warm, but a part of you can almost feel the packed dirt underfoot, the soft hum of insects in the distance, and the gentle energy of a community waking to another long day. Let your worries drift away like petals floating downstream. In the chapters ahead, we'll explore the world of the feudal Japanese peasant, how the seasons dictated every task, how labor in the fields shaped the body and spirit, and how villages supported one another through both prosperity and hardship. We'll listen to the quiet chatter at communal wells, feel the rhythm of hands weaving straw or threshing grain, and observe families sharing modest meals after long days beneath the sun. Through it all, we move at an unhurried, peaceful pace, allowing each scene to unfold like brushstrokes on a traditional ink painting. Now that you're relaxed and ready, let's begin this serene journey into the daily life of Japan's rural past. Our first chapter starts with the land itself, the rice paddies, forest edges, and winding footpaths that defined the world of the peasantry. Settle in, breathe deeply, and let the quiet beauty of this history carry you gently onward. And if you enjoy this tranquil exploration, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you can join many more calm journeys through time. A step back in time. Imagine the soft light of dawn creeping over distant mountains as you awaken on a straw mat. You are in a small thatched hut, walls made of wood and mud, the air cold and still. Outside, a rooster crows, and faint mist clings to the rice paddies. This isn't a modern morning, it's feudal Japan, centuries ago. The world around you is quiet, except for the gentle sounds of nature and the stirrings of your family as they rise before sunrise. You pull a thin cotton blanket around your shoulders, feeling the morning chill seeping through the cracks of your humble home. In a few moments, you'll step outside into a life of hard labor and humble duty, a life that we in the modern world would find extraordinarily harsh and unforgiving. Yet for the peasant families of feudal Japan, this was simply everyday existence. In feudal Japan, roughly 80–90% of the population were peasants tied to agricultural villages. They lived by the rhythm of the seasons, bound to the soil that fed them and to the lords who ruled over them. The pace of life was slow and cyclical, but the demands were relentless. From the crack of dawn till dusk, toil awaited. As you rub sleep from your eyes in the dim interior of your hut, you already know the day will be long. Your muscles are sore from yesterday's work and the work of countless days before. Still, a new day begins, calm and indifferent to your fatigue. This is how every day must begin, with resignation and resolve. A gentle voice in your mind might remind you of a saying, perhaps something your mother told you, Ichi nichi, isho, one day, one life. In other words, each day's work is your life's work. You sigh, stand up, and prepare to live that truth once more. Despite the tranquil morning scene, a sense of urgency underlies everything. There is rice to tend, water to manage, and mouths to feed. You might think you could get used to it, but the reality is, life as a peasant here is unimaginably strenuous compared to modern comforts. The truth is that you, or any modern person, wouldn't last a day as a peasant in feudal Japan, where every hour brought physical hardship, and the stakes were nothing less than survival. Before diving into the flow of a peasant's day, let's gently set the stage by understanding the strict social world you inhabit and the burdens placed on your shoulders. The rigid world of feudal Japan. Stepping out of your hut, you see the village around you stirring awake. It's a small rural village, perhaps home to a few hundred souls. In the feudal era, roughly the 12th through 19th centuries, villages like this one dotted the Japanese countryside. There were tens of thousands of them, each with maybe 100 families living together. Your village is likely centered around agriculture, surrounded by patchworks of rice paddies in the flatlands, and maybe vegetable plots or bamboo groves on the edges. Everyone here knows their place. Japan's society is strictly hierarchical. At the top are the samurai lords and their retainers, and at the bottom are commoners, farmers like you, as well as artisans and merchants. You've been taught since childhood that this order is natural and unchangeable. The Tokugawa shogunate, the military government of the Edo period, enforces these social divisions with iron certainty, believing that each class must live, dress, and even eat according to its station. As a peasant, you hold the second rank in name, below samurai, above artisans and merchants. But this rank is a bit misleading. It certainly doesn't mean you have comfort or power. Rather, it reflects that you are the backbone of the nation's economy, the one who produces rice and food. The authorities praise farmers as the foundation of society, but they also burden you with heavy obligations. In reality, you have virtually no individual rights under the law. The village, not the individual, is the smallest unit of society. Your family's status and duties are all that matter to the government. There are village headmen and elders who act as intermediaries between your community and the Lord's officials. They keep order and ensure taxes are collected. If you ever have a grievance, there's no easy way to appeal. The word of a peasant carries almost no weight against the word of a samurai or official. The class system is not just abstract, it shapes daily behavior in very real ways. You have been taught never to offend or even inconvenience a samurai. Failing to show proper respect could be deadly. Samurai were legally allowed to kill a commoner for the slightest insult under the tradition of kirasut gomen, authorization to cut and leave. This means that if you accidentally bump into a passing samurai or touch his sword, or if he merely imagines you gave him a disrespectful glance, he might draw his blade. In theory, there are rules. He's supposed to have justification and report the killing, but in practice, you live in quiet fear of these aristocratic warriors. In your own village, you seldom see samurai except perhaps a small garrison or the Lord's tax inspectors. But on the rare occasion one rides through, every peasant quickly bows low or steps aside, eyes averted. You could literally be executed for less than touching a samurai's property or failing to prostrate yourself fast enough. So you stay vigilant and humble at all times. Not only must you show deference, but there are laws governing what you can wear, eat, and do, all to reinforce social order. Sumptuary laws dictate that peasants dress plainly and live frugally. Luxuries are forbidden to you. Only certain fabrics are allowed. For everyday clothing, coarse hemp or cheap cotton are permitted, but silk or fine materials are reserved for the elite. The government has even, at times, forbidden peasants from drinking tea or sake, or from eating white rice, because these are seen as indulgences better left to the higher classes. In fact, the shogunate explicitly encouraged peasants to consume millet or barley instead of the precious rice that was needed for taxes. There are rules that you should make your own tools at home and avoid buying fancy goods. The intent is to keep you poor, pious, and productive, focusing only on farming. In essence, society says, stay in your lane, work hard, and don't aspire beyond your station. Despite these restrictions, peasants do form the fabric of communal life. There is a village council of elders that handles local matters. Most disputes or minor crimes in the village are settled by your own community leaders, rather than by outside authorities. Punishments can be communal and severe. In extreme cases, a troublemaker might be banished from the village, which is essentially a death sentence, since an outcast peasant has nowhere to safely go. Everyone is expected to contribute to village projects and to cooperate. The group solidarity is strong. For example, if there's a peasant uprising, a rare dangerous act of protest against a lord, everyone is expected to join. If you don't, you could be ostracized by your neighbors. Surviving as a peasant isn't just about pleasing your lord. It's also about fitting into the tight-knit community, where every family relies on the others. Take a slow breath now and observe your surroundings. The sky is lightening to a pale grey. Smoke rises from a few huts as fires are lit. You smell wood smoke and thin gruel cooking. Children cry and roosters crow. An elderly neighbor shuffles by with a bundle of sticks for the morning fire. Life here is materially poor. Your village is a cluster of small shanties clumped together, built on the least arable land, so the best soil can be used for rice fields. The huts have thatched roofs, dirt floors in some sections, and maybe a single raised wooden platform where the family sleeps together. There's a central fire pit, an airori, where you cook, and which provides meager heat. Warmth is precious. Winters are cold, and you have to ration firewood. Often you'll bundle in layers of cloth inside rather than keep a big fire going, because wood is scarce. Peasants are generally only allowed to gather dead wood. Cutting live trees from the Lord's forest could be punished, so firewood comes from fallen branches. The concept of privacy is nearly non-existent. Several generations of your family might share the one-room hut. You've grown up hearing your siblings and parents breathing and snoring at night next to you. It's a life of closeness to your kin, to your community, to the earth. Now, as the village fully wakes and the sky brightens, it's time to begin the labors of the day. Let's walk through a typical day and a full year of your life as a peasant farmer, from the busy planting of spring to the bitter cold of winter. Through it all, we will keep a calm, steady gaze on the reality of each moment. This isn't a tale of dramatic battles or heroic adventures. It's the slow, grinding story of survival and duty. It may be a brutal existence, but it also has its rhythms and small consolations. By immersing ourselves in it, we can understand just how far removed it is from the modern life of comfort, and why a modern person would struggle to last even a day under these conditions. Spring, dawn of the farming year. Spring in your village arrives with a subtle transformation. The barren paddies, which lay quiet through winter, are coming back to life. Tiny green shoots and buds appear on the trees. The air is still chilly in the early mornings, but the frost melts quickly once the sun rises. Spring is the season of renewal and intense labor. As a farmer, you feel both hope and anxiety. Hope for a good crop, anxiety because there is so much work to be done to ensure that crop. You wake well before sunrise, as do all the able-bodied adults in the village. The moment it's light enough to see, you need to be out in the fields. Today, like many spring days, will be dedicated to preparing the rice paddies for planting. Your body is your alarm clock. Years of rising early have attuned you to the sun. Perhaps the song of a lark or just the habit of duty pulls you from sleep. There's no luxury of lying in. Dawn work is critical because by midday, the work must be at a certain stage. First comes a simple breakfast. Your wife or mother, or perhaps you if you're a woman in the household, ladles out a thin porridge of millet and barley. White rice, ironically, is rare on your table. Although you labor endlessly in rice fields, most of the white rice is owed as tax to your lord. So your family eats the lesser grains. This morning's gruel is warm and filling enough. If bland, you might have a few pickled greens or radish to add a salty taste. Some days there might be a little miso soup or a roasted sweet potato if you've stored any. But meals are typically frugal. Still, the calories are important for the hard work ahead. You sip some hot water or weak tea. Tea leaves are a mild luxury, and official rules frown on peasants indulging in tea. But in practice, many farm families do drink tea when they can, especially in tea-growing regions. If you have children, they slurp up their portion quickly. Even little kids might join in the work later in the day, such as helping to chase birds from newly sown seeds. So everyone needs some nourishment. After breakfast, as the sky grows rosy, you head to the fields with your tools. You carry a wooden plow and perhaps lead an ox or water buffalo if your village is lucky enough to own draft animals. Many villages keep a couple of oxen or water buffalo for communal use. These animals are precious, they're needed for plowing, and they are too valuable to slaughter for meat. Meat from livestock is rarely eaten anyway, partly due to Buddhist customs against killing animals, and partly because raising animals for meat isn't practical on scarce land. So your buffalo is a work partner, almost a part of the community. If you don't have animal help, then it's human muscle power alone to till the soil. Often a combination of both is used. Spring tasks include plowing, flooding, and transplanting. First, the paddy fields, small leveled plots, enclosed by earthen dikes, must be plowed to soften the soil. You guide the ox-drawn plow through the mud, churning the earth that has lain fallow through winter. It's back-breaking work. The plow is heavy, the mud deep, and you often have to wade in barefoot to direct the ox. Thick mud sucks at your legs. The cold water chills your feet and hands. Early spring water can be icy, but you grow accustomed to it. You lean your weight into the plow handle and feel the resistance of the soil. Clods turn over, mixing with water that's been let in from irrigation channels. By mid-morning, the once dry paddies have become a patchwork of flooded, chocolate-brown fields, glistening under the sun. Water is life, for the rice farmer. An intricate system of irrigation canals connects your village's fields to rivers or streams. Maintaining these canals is a collective task. Every villager pitches in to dredge them, clear debris, and repair embankments. Perhaps a week ago, before planting started, the whole village turned out for a canal cleaning day. Men, women, and older children worked side by side, scooping out mud, removing weeds, making sure the precious water will flow unobstructed to each field. Cooperation is not optional, it's expected. If someone in the village shirked this duty, they'd face the scorn of neighbors or even fines. Almost every task in agrarian life here is communal, from planting and harvesting to building houses and roads. This morning as you work, you hear other farmers in adjacent paddies calling out to each other, perhaps coordinating the water release from one plot to the next. There's a careful order to which fields are flooded first, usually starting from upstream and moving down. Elders or an appointed water manager in the village oversee this distribution. By late morning, it's time to transplant rice seedlings. Weeks earlier, seeds were sown in small seedling beds. Now, those young rice plants, bright green and a few inches tall, must be moved to the prepared paddies. This task falls largely to the women of the village, and any men not handling the oxen or heavy work. You might see lines of women in light cotton kimonos wading through knee-deep water, each with a bundle of seedlings in one hand. They bend down, planting clumps of seedlings in neat rows by hand, one by one. It is meticulous, monotonous work. Bend, plant, step, bend, plant, step, hour after hour. The women chat or even sing work songs to keep rhythm and make the labor more bearable. Their backs ache from stooping. Even young girls join in and learn the technique early, because many hands are needed. Men too will do this job, but often the division is that men handle more of the ploughing, hauling, and maintenance of dikes, whereas women do a lot of the transplanting and weeding, which require constant bending. Everyone gets covered in mud regardless. Children too may be in the mud, perhaps chasing frogs or helping their mothers by fetching more seedlings. The scene might almost look joyful from afar. Conical straw hats bobbing, laughter over a stuck foot in the mud. But don't let the light-hearted moments fool you. It's intensely physical labor from dawn until midday, and it's only the beginning of the growing season. Let's pause and consider the physical toll. By midday, the sun is higher, and your stomach reminds you it's been working a long time since that dawn gruel. The village has no concept of a 9-to-5 workday or a weekend. Sunlight is your time card. In spring, you work as long as there is light to see by. That could mean 12 or more hours of labor in the fields, with perhaps a short rest for meals. Your lower back throbs from bending over the paddies. Your feet are cold and pruny from the water. The weight of wet clothes and mud clinging to your legs adds to your fatigue. There's no ergonomic tool or ox-driven transplanter to lighten this load. Just human hands and persistence. Around noon, people take a brief break. You retreat to a dry bank or to the shade of a tree at the field's edge. Lunch is very simple. Maybe rice balls made not from fine white rice, which is scarce for you, but from brown rice mixed with millet or barley, sprinkled with a bit of salt, or wrapped in a pickled leaf for flavor. Or perhaps it's more of the same barley porridge from morning, carried in a wooden tub and eaten cold. If your family had a good store of radishes or turnips, you might have some pickled slices to nibble. Water to drink is scooped from the village well or a clear stream. Everyone knows to boil drinking water when possible, as drinking unboiled water can lead to illness. though sometimes thirst leads you to risk it. Today, you have no luxury like sweets or tea, just plain water and food meant to refuel your body. You sit with others, and there's quiet conversation, talk of the weather, worries about any pests seen on the seedlings, maybe a light joke or two. Someone's toddler plays in the dirt nearby, and a few older folks bring lunch out to the workers, since not everyone can trek back to the village at midday. These small communal gatherings are one of the few restful moments in the day. You savor it, even as you know it's fleeting. After lunch, it's back to work under the strengthening sun. Spring days can actually be pleasant. Mild temperatures, the scent of blossoms from a nearby grove, but you might not have much attention for the beauty around you. The schedule is pressing. All the rice must be planted in a timely fashion, usually within a short window of weeks, to ensure a good synchronized harvest. You sometimes hear the distant ring of a watchtower bell in the afternoons. Larger towns have bells to mark the hour. In the countryside, you might not have such signals, but perhaps your village temple bell rings out to signal noon or evening. In any case, you judge time by the sun's arc. Tools clink, oxen snort, and villagers call out instructions or encouragement. By late afternoon, exhaustion sets in deeply, but the work isn't done, not until sunset. Let's say by today's end, you and your fellow villagers have managed to finish transplanting the seedlings in several paddies. There's a sense of accomplishment. You see the fields now as squares of shallow water filled with neat rows of tender green rice plants waving gently. It's a hopeful sight. If all goes well, those plants will grow tall and heavy with grain by autumn. You know, however, that many trials lie ahead. Drought, flood, pests, or simply a bad yield could dash those hopes. Farming is always an uncertain gamble, and in feudal Japan, there are no crop insurance policies or government safety nets. If nature turns cruel, all you have is the community and whatever reserves of grain might be stored, and those are often claimed as tax or used up in past lean times. Nevertheless, as you wash the mud off your legs and feet at a ditch, or perhaps at the bathhouse, if your village has communal baths heated in the evening, you allow yourself a small moment of satisfaction that the first major hurdle, planting, is nearly completed this spring. Evening comes, and the sky glows orange as the sun sets. The day's labor winds down. You and the others herd the oxen back to their shed. Tools are gathered and brought in. Leaving them out might invite rust or theft by wild animals. Foxes sometimes steal things out of curiosity. A villager lights a small lantern as dusk falls. There is no electricity, only flame. The village women, after cleaning themselves up a bit, start cooking the evening meal. Inside your home, a fire crackles under the cooking pot, giving off a dim reddish light, and a lot of smoke that escapes through a hole in the roof. The smell of smoke, earthy sweat, and rice water defines the atmosphere of a peasant home at dusk. Tonight's dinner might be a little better than lunch. Perhaps a bowl of miso soup with wild herbs or greens gathered from the hills, and a scoop of mixed grains. If you are fortunate, you might have some tofu or a bit of dried fish to add protein. Fish is a common supplement in villages near rivers or the sea, and though Buddhist beliefs discouraged meat eating, fish was usually acceptable and an important source of nourishment when available. Often peasants also foraged for anything edible: wild plants, nuts, berries, or even insects. You've probably eaten grasshoppers, roasted in soy sauce, a treat called inago in some regions, or crickets as snacks, and you don't mind. They add protein, and crunch, a break from plain grains. After dinner, night falls fully. Without artificial lighting, nightlife is minimal. Maybe you and your family exchange a few quiet words or prayers at the household kamidana, Shinto shrine, or Buddhist altar, thanking the deities or ancestors for the day's work and praying for a good harvest. Your body is weary. The children have already nodded off, and you'll join them soon. But spring nights can be cold. You bundle up in whatever quilts or straw mats you have. If you have a single cotton padded kimono for winter, you might still use it on cool spring nights. Cotton is precious. Many poor peasants rely on homespun hemp cloth, which is rough and not very warm. In some regions, families patch together bits of cotton cloth traded down from cities to make a quilt or coat. The technique of layering and stitching these patches is known as sashiko, resulting in the famous boro patchwork garments that are handed down for generations. You might own one good layered jacket, sewn by your wife or mother during the winter months. Peasant clothing is utilitarian. Modest indigo-dyed cotton or hemp, often heavily patched and restitched to last long. By law, it's supposed to be simple and not brightly colored. No lavish reds or golds. Those are for samurai and nobles. But within those limits, your family has tried to make durable, comfortable work clothes. Tonight, that old jacket will serve as a blanket. Lying on the floor with only a straw mat or thin futon, you feel every muscle ache. Before you drift off, you might hear night insects chirping outside, or the distant hoot of an owl. Maybe a dog barks somewhere, or a baby fusses next door. Otherwise, it's profoundly dark and still. There is a certain peace in these moments. The world has narrowed to the warmth of your sleeping family huddled together and the sound of your own breath. Tomorrow, and many tomorrows after, will demand the same strength. Spring planting will continue until all fields are done. Then will come days of weeding and guarding the seedlings. But for now, you sleep, letting your mind and body recover. The last thought that crosses your mind might be a prayer that the next day will be sunny but not too hot, that the water in the paddies will stay at the right level, and that your Lord's tax collectors won't decide to raise the rice quota unexpectedly. Such worries never fully leave you, but in sheer exhaustion, you surrender to sleep. Summer, toiling under the sun. The seasons turn, almost without notice. The tender green rice sprouts you planted in spring have taken root. As summer arrives, the paddies transform into lush expanses of vibrant green, like a sea of emerald swaying with each breeze. The beauty of it is undeniable, each stalk a promise of grain. But for you, summer means long, sweltering days of ceaseless toil. In early summer, the rice fields require constant attention. You awaken again at first light, now to the droning of cicadas and the already warm air of a summer dawn. The humidity in Japan's summers can be intense. You may feel sweat on your brow, even in the morning. Today's main task: weeding the paddies and maintaining the irrigation. Rice cannot thrive with competition from weeds, and with hundreds of paddies in the village, the weeding seems endless. It is done by hand, bent over or on one's knees in the flooded fields, plucking out unwanted grasses and plants that could rob the rice of nutrients. The work that women and men did to plant, they now repeat in tending. Stoop, reach, pull weed, move, stoop again, hour after hour. By now your lower back has a permanent dull pain. You barely remember what it's like to live without backache. The sun climbs higher, and you can feel its heat pressing on your shoulders. You wear a woven straw hat, kasa, with a wide brim to keep the sun off your face and neck. Without it, the sun would scorch you. Even so, many peasants end up with deeply tanned, leathery skin by midsummer. You've tied a thin tenugui cloth around your forehead to catch sweat before it stings your eyes. Your clothing in summer is minimal and light, perhaps just a short cotton kimono, or a tucked-up yukata, and a pair of old shorts or loincloth underneath. Some farmers even work shirtless with just a straw raincoat over their back if needed. But modesty and fear of sunburn usually means a light top stays on. A straw raincoat, minnow, might hang nearby or be worn when sudden showers pass. Summer is also the season of unpredictable rain and thunderstorms. These straw capes, handmade from rice straw by villagers during the winter, make you look almost like a walking haystack, but they shed water fairly well. They also double as sun protection if needed. For footwear, you have rough waraji sandals made of straw, but often you kick them off to wade barefoot in the mud. It's easier to feel what you're doing that way. Your feet have grown tough over years of going unshod in fields. You occasionally step on a sharp stone or stub a toe on something unseen in the muddy water. You wince, maybe bleed a little, but carry on. There's no quitting because of a small cut or leech bite. As you weed, you remain alert for any issues in the field. You look for pests, insects like rice, stem borers, or grasshoppers that might chew the young plants. If you find them, you pinch them dead or flick them into the water for fish to eat. In the distance, you hear boys and old men using clappers or shouting to scare away birds. Sparrows are a menace. They descend in flocks to peck at tender rice grains once they appear. Villagers post scarecrows and patrol the fields, making noise to protect the crop. This is a never-ending battle. Sometimes children are given the job of bird scaring. They run around with noisemakers, delighting in the chase. But birds are clever and persistent, so constant vigilance is required. Another task, checking the irrigation channels for blockages. Summer heat evaporates water quickly. Each day, someone from the village ensures that water flows smoothly from the source river to every paddy. You might take a turn wading into the canal, removing leaves or debris. If there's a wooden sluice gate, you adjust it to regulate flow. Water management is precise. Too little water and the rice dries. Too much and the roots rot. On days when rain is scarce, you fret about drought. You watch the skies for the dark clouds of a welcome afternoon thunderstorm. Conversely, if heavy rains come, and in monsoon season, they do, you scramble to reinforce dikes and drain excess water to prevent floods. Many a peasant's crop has been ruined by a single ill-timed downpour that sent a torrent through the fields, washing away seedlings or causing a landslide. Your life, you realize, is at the mercy of the elements. Nature is both giver and taker of fortune. By midday in summer, the heat is oppressive. The air is thick and still, cicadas screaming from the trees. Sweat drips from your face and soaks your clothing. You take more frequent short pauses, straightening your back, maybe stretching to relieve the stiffness. You might carry a bamboo flask of water or weak barley tea to the field to stay hydrated. Even though you're used to the conditions, heat stroke is a real danger. So the elders advise everyone to take shade periodically. Perhaps there's a large tree at the edge of the field. You and others gather under it for a few minutes to cool down. You remove your hat, wipe your face with your sleeve, and watch steam seeming to rise off the paddies. The conversation, if any, is sparse and muttered. The heat saps your energy for talking. For lunch, It's the same routine, but maybe you seek a breeze by a stream to eat. If your village is near a stream, some workers dunk themselves briefly to rinse off sweat and mud. Cleanliness is relative here. Everyone is perpetually a bit dirty from labor, but the Japanese do value bathing. In fact, when possible, villagers take hot baths, often communally at a bathhouse or in large tubs, a few times a week, scrubbing the dirt off. Summer might allow for more frequent quick washes in the river. However, midday isn't for a full bath, just a splash. You unwrap your rice ball or scoop up your bowl of cold grains and chew silently. You think about the progress of the crop. The plants look healthy so far, a good sign. You also might think about how much of this rice you'll actually get to keep. Perhaps you know that historically, lords claimed as much as 40–50% of the rice yield as tax, in some cases, even more. During your grandfather's time or before, some warlord might have levied half of everything as tax each year. Now, under the Tokugawa peace, the rates still hover around that mark. In fact, rumors say some domains quietly squeeze peasants for up to 70% of their harvest when they need extra revenue, a practically ruinous rate that leaves farming families on the brink of starvation. You can't verify the number, but looking at the small portion of last year's rice that you had left for your family, you feel the weight of those taxes. The village had to cart off sack after sack of rice to the lord's granary after harvest, leaving only husks and hopes to survive on. The Tokugawa era has a saying, "Nomin wa kusuri, no kazu." Farmers are as numerous as grass. It implies peasants are plentiful and expendable. It's a bitter thought that while you toil under the sun, a huge part of the fruits of your labor is destined not for your children's mouths, but for the storehouses of some distant castle. After lunch, you and the others resume work, albeit at a slightly slower pace due to the heat. In the height of summer, afternoons can be brutal. Sometimes, mercifully, a cloud cover or light rain shower passes, giving you a break from the sun. On other days, it's relentlessly bright. You tie your hat down tighter and carry on weeding, checking each plant. By now, mosquitoes breed in the standing water, and they buzz around, biting your arms and neck. You smack them when you can, but mostly endure the itching. The paddies are alive with other creatures too. Frogs, dragonflies, loaches, mudfish that wriggle in the mud. In a way, the field is an ecosystem you're part of. Occasionally, you might catch some of these creatures. It's not unheard of for peasants to catch small fish or eels from the paddies or irrigation canals to supplement their diet. You could set a simple trap in a canal and maybe get a catfish for dinner, a rare protein boost when successful. Throughout summer, beyond field work, there are other chores. If your family has a kitchen garden, you tend to vegetables like daikon, radishes, greens, or soybeans planted at the edge of paddies. Soybeans are important for making miso and tofu, staples in protein since meat is scarce. You also might cultivate mulberry leaves. If any family member is involved in sericulture, silk farming, some peasant households raise silkworms as a side endeavor, feeding them mulberry leaves and selling the cocoons. But this is more common in certain regions. Some villagers may also grow cotton or hemp to spin into textiles for home use or sale. Summer is a growing season for all these, so you spend some time tending those plants too. The work truly never ends. When you're not in the rice paddies, you're patching your roof, fixing tools, collecting firewood from the woods, or doing obligatory labor for community projects, perhaps repairing the local road or helping thatch a neighbor's new roof. the village collectively builds houses for those who need one. Women, after coming back from the fields, still have tasks like taking care of children, cooking, and spinning or weaving cloth at home when they have spare moments. A peasant woman's day is double duty: farm labor plus domestic chores. You might step into your hut after sunset to find your wife hunched by a small lamp, spinning hemp or cotton thread on a spindle. She might do this for hours in the evening, because the family needs new cloth for clothing, or needs thread to mend fishing nets, etc. This constant labor is just accepted as normal. Yet, summer is not without any joy or relief. Evening in summertime can be unexpectedly pleasant. After an exhausting day, as the sun finally dips below the horizon, the air cools slightly and a breeze might pick up. The fields emit a rich, wet earth smell, mixed with the fragrance of green rice plants. It's a smell of life and growing grain. In a successful year, that smell foretells plenty. Fireflies begin to flit over the paddies as darkness falls, their tiny lights dancing above the water. This sight can still enchant you, reminding you of childhood nights chasing these magical bugs. In many villages, summer is also the time of some festivals. For instance, Obon in the 7th lunar month, usually August, is when people honor the spirits of their ancestors. Your village might hold a small Obon Odori dance in the evening, a rare break from work where villagers gather, light paper lanterns, drum taiko drums softly and dance in a circle to remember the departed. You, with arms aching and feet blistered, still join in, turning slowly to the music, because it's tradition, and because even the hardest life needs moments of community celebration. There's a gentle eeriness and beauty to these nights, lanterns reflecting on the dark rice paddies, the rhythmic thump of drums, and the knowledge that for this night, labor is set aside in favor of remembrance and togetherness. Such events are few, though. Most summer nights, you collapse into sleep soon after supper. You eat more in summer if you can, because your body demands it. Typically, 2 meals a day is standard for peasants, one after morning's work and one at day's end, though sometimes a light snack at midday is included. You might notice that samurai and rich city folks eat 3 meals a day with ease. But for you, food is too precious to have more than necessary. In a good year, you have enough rice and millet to be comfortably fed until next harvest. In a bad year, summer is the lean time when last year's stores are nearly gone. You might be stretching out your rice with wild herbs or chestnuts, or even acorns ground into flour. Some historical accounts note that peasants gathered tree barks, roots in famine times, to make rough bread or gruel. But let's assume this year so far is normal, with no famine at the moment. You've got a bit of last harvest's rice left, but are saving it for planting or for special days. So daily, you eat millet, barley, or buckwheat noodles, if those grains grow locally. Perhaps once in a while, you treat yourself to some mochi, pounded rice cakes, if rice is available, though that's more common in winter or New Year. One physical aspect of summer that affects you: disease and illness. The warmer months bring not just insects that plague your crops, but also diseases that can devastate your family. In an age with no antibiotics and minimal medical knowledge, common illnesses can be fatal. Summer may bring outbreaks of dysentery or other waterborne diseases, especially if the drinking water is contaminated by floods or poor sanitation. You and your fellow villagers try to boil water and keep waste away from wells, but it's a challenge. If someone does fall ill with a fever or diarrhea, the local remedies are limited. perhaps an herbal concoction from the village healer, or simply rest and prayers. There are no hospitals. Maybe a Buddhist temple nearby offers some aid or medicinal herbs. But often, disease runs its course unchecked. Children are especially vulnerable. It's a sad truth that many peasant children die young from smallpox, measles, intestinal illnesses, or simple malnutrition when food is short. Infant mortality is heartbreakingly high. Almost every family has lost someone small, a memory carried as quietly persistent grief. In summer, when measles or pox might sweep through multiple villages, you see the little graves multiply on the hill. You've learned not to get too hopeful until a child passes those perilous early years. If you have several children, it's sadly expected that not all will reach adulthood. Even adults are not spared. Life expectancy for those who survive childhood might reach into the 50 seconds at best. But many adults are cut down earlier by diseases or work accidents. You've seen neighbors crippled by years of toil, or an infection from a simple wound turn fatal. There's no real concept of healthcare as we know it. You rely on folk remedies, a poultice of herbs on a wound, a tea of specific roots for a fever. Sometimes they help, sometimes they don't. You do your best to stay healthy, eating wild garlic or herbs believed to strengthen the body, observing spiritual purity, and avoiding taboos that might invite illness. But much is out of your hands. It's fair to say that in feudal Japan's countryside, every summer was a trial, not just of back-breaking work, but also of endurance against sickness. Only the hardiest, or luckiest, survive year after year. Yet here you are, this summer, plugging along. The patterns of weeding, repairing, guarding the crop continue through June, July, and into August. By late summer, the rice plants are tall, coming up to your waist or higher, and forming heavy heads of grain that start to bend the stalks. The color of the fields slowly shifts from green to a golden hue as the grain ripens. You find yourself offering little prayers more frequently now. Please, let no typhoon strike. Let no army of locusts descend. Let the harvest come safely. You recall stories of entire villages losing their crops at the last minute to disasters, and you push those thoughts away with a shudder. The final days of summer are brutally hot, but they carry a sense of urgency and anticipation. Soon, it will be time for harvest, the moment of truth for all your hard work. You begin sharpening your sickles and preparing storage sacks. The women ready large woven baskets and winnowing trays. Everyone is excited but anxious. A farming proverb might echo in your mind. Don't praise the harvest before it's in, so you remain humble and focused. On the last night of summer, perhaps there is a moment of calm. Crickets chirp loudly. You step outside your hut and gaze at the sky, a vast, starry sky, unmarred by city lights. The Milky Way splashes across like a celestial river. You can pick out a few familiar constellations that your parents taught you. In Japanese folklore, the stars Vega and Altair, we call them Orihime and Hikoboshi, are star-crossed lovers who meet only once a year, in summer, during the Tanabata festival. Maybe your village celebrated Tanabata in early July with simple paper decorations on bamboo. As you look at the stars now, you remember a wish you wrote on a paper slip, asking for a good harvest and family's health. It's a quiet, introspective moment, a luxury to even contemplate the stars when daily life is so demanding. But these silent nights give you the mental space to dream, to wonder if next year might be easier, or if your children might see a better life. Then you hear a baby cry, or a cow low from a shed, and reality pulls you back. You have to sleep. Tomorrow begins the most crucial phase of the farming year, autumn harvest. Autumn, harvest and hefty taxes. As the suffocating heat of summer eases, a crispness enters the air. Autumn in Japan can be truly beautiful. The hills may blaze with red and orange maple leaves. The evenings grow cool and clear. But for you, a peasant farmer, autumn is the busiest and most critical time of all. It's harvest season, the moment when a year's worth of labor and your family's fate is decided in the span of weeks. There is excitement in the village. People rise even earlier than usual, eager to start cutting the rice as soon as the dew dries each morning. Every able hand, from the strongest men to elderly grandparents and children who can barely carry a sheaf, is involved in the harvest. The rice stalks are now golden and heavy with ripe grains. Harvest typically begins in the 9th lunar month, around September, in the modern calendar, and can last through October, depending on the region and how much land there is to cover. On the first day of harvest, you might see villagers make a small offering in the fields. Perhaps a cup of sake or a few rice stalks are set aside for the local deity or spirits to thank them and ask for their continued blessing. Then, with ritual done, the flurry of work begins. You take your sharpened sickle in hand and step into the fields at first light. Cutting rice by hand is both art and muscle. You grab a handful of stalks and slice them near the base with the serrated sickle. The stalks fall into your other hand. You lay them down neatly, then move forward, repeating in a steady rhythm. Grip, slice, gather, move. Within minutes, your back is bent and stays that way for hours. Many in the village tie towels around their lower back or use a kind of belt for support, but it only helps a bit. It's grueling work, but there's an adrenaline to harvest, a sense of racing against time and weather. You want to get the crop in before any late typhoon might strike, or before animals eat too much of it. Everyone feels a common purpose and urgency. Bundles of cut rice accumulate. Women follow behind the cutters, gathering the stalks into sheaves. They bind each sheaf with a twist of rice straw. These sheaves are then carried and hung on wooden racks or spread on mats to dry in the sun. The whole village landscape changes. Racks laden with rice sheaves dot the fields, and every sunny yard space might be covered with grains drying. It's a beautiful sight. Golden rice drying under the blue autumn sky. The soundscape changes too. Instead of frogs and insects, you now hear the swish of sickles, the rustle of stalks, the chatter of villagers calling out for extra hands or joking to keep morale up. Despite the hardness of the work, harvest time can be almost festive. People know that if they bring in a good harvest, there might be a celebration after. Sometimes the headman promises a village feast once the taxes are delivered. Maybe they'll open a barrel of sake or pound mochi for all to share. Such thoughts keep you going. When your arms get sore from swinging the sickle, once the rice is cut and partially dried, the next step is threshing, separating the grain from the stalks. Traditionally, this can be done by beating the rice sheaves against a wooden frame or by using a simple threshing tool like a foot-operated flail or later a crank machine in the late Edo period, if your village is fortunate to have one. Often, families beat their rice bundles on a flat piece of wood to knock the grains off. The grains, still in their husks, rain down on a cloth or mat, spread to catch them. Children are good at this job. They enjoy whacking the bundles and watching the grains fly. After threshing comes winnowing, tossing the grains in baskets to let the chaff, the light husk pieces, blow away in the breeze, leaving the heavier rice grains behind. On a dry, breezy day, you'll see villagers standing with large, flat baskets, skillfully flipping the threshed rice in the air and catching it over and over as a fine dust of chaff drifts off. By evening, their hair and clothes are coated with a layer of pale chaff. Coughing is common. Everyone's a bit choked from the dust. But gradually, sack by sack, the cleaned rice is collected. There is joy in seeing the fruits of your labor, mounds of plump rice grains. Perhaps you run your hands through a basket of rice and feel the cool, hard grains on your skin. This is what will feed your family. Or rather, this is what will feed the coffers of your lord first, and then your family, if anything remains. That thought is never far away. Japanese feudal lords, daimyo, measure their wealth in koku of rice, one koku being roughly the amount one person eats in a year, about 330 pounds of rice. Your village's productivity and tax obligation are calculated in these terms. For example, if your village is assessed at 500 koku, that means collectively you owe perhaps 250 koku, 50%, or more as tax, depending on the rate. Some domains in history infamously demanded nearly all the rice except what peasants needed to not die, effectively taxing them into starvation to maximize exports or pay for projects. The Tokugawa shogunate's records and many accounts note that peasants were often taxed so heavily that they barely survived. It's said that during this peaceful Edo period, the farmers supported the roof of the nation with their rice, yet their own tables were left bare. Now comes the moment that mixes pride with pain, delivering the tax rice. After you set aside the portion for next year's seed, and maybe a tiny reserve for emergencies, the bulk of the best rice, usually polished white rice, must be sent to your daimyo's granaries. In some villages, the tax might be around 40–50% of the yield. In harsher times, it could creep higher. Let's say your household managed to produce 10 bales of rice. For simplicity, you might have to turn over 5 or 6 of those to the Lord. That leaves only 4 or 5 bales for your family's use, to last until the next harvest a year away. And from that remainder, you still have to save some as seed grain. You can see how tight it is. If the harvest was even slightly less, you'd be in big trouble. And if it was a bad year, you might have barely enough to pay tax, with nothing left to eat. This is how famines start. One bad harvest, and the impossibility of meeting both tax obligations and basic food needs. The Lord's representatives typically come to collect, or the village headman organizes a delivery. You recall earlier years, stern samurai officials arriving on horseback or palanquin, checking the ledgers and inspecting the rice quality. The villagers line up sack after sack at the storehouse, and the officials weigh or measure it. Sometimes they use wooden boxes or sacks of standard size to measure volume. You've heard stories of corrupt officials using slightly oversized measures to cheat peasants into giving more than required, or of samurai inspectors rejecting rice as poor quality if it's not fully white and unbroken, thus forcing villagers to polish it more, which reduces quantity before acceptance. It's always a tense time. The entire year's sweat is being handed over. No peasant is foolish enough to openly complain. Doing so could invite brutal punishment. Instead, you all wear polite, blank faces as the rice is taken. Inside, you feel a pang with each sack leaving your hands. All that effort gone to someone else's store. There's a bit of bitterness, maybe, but also a grim understanding. If you don't comply, the consequences are worse. The Lord's samurai could punish the whole village, take hostages, or even execute the headman for tax delinquency. Such things have happened in harsher times. After the tax is collected, you finally gauge what's left for your family. You store your share in large clay pots, or sack it and hide it in your storeroom loft, safe from mice if possible. From now on, this has to last. If it looks to be a good amount, your family breathes a sigh of relief. Maybe you'll even have surplus to sell. Peasants are allowed to sell excess rice or other crops in local markets once taxes are met. With a bit of coin, you could buy fabric, salt, or a new pot, things you can't produce yourself. But if the remainder is meager, you immediately start calculating how to stretch it. Perhaps you'll mix more millet and wild grains into your rice to make it last. You probably do that anyway. Maybe you'll need to forage more acorns, or go hunting for rabbits or birds in the woods to supplement diet, though hunting big game like boar or deer could be illegal for peasants, reserved for samurai sport. But some peasants poach, discreetly, when starving. You might already plan to do side work in winter, like making charcoal or weaving straw mats to trade for food later if needed. The mental math of survival is a constant in peasant life. It's worth noting, when taxes and hardships grew too severe, peasants sometimes did revolt. Throughout the Edo period, there were hundreds of small-scale peasant uprisings called iki, or Hayakusho Iki. Typically, these were driven by unbearable taxes, bad harvests, or corrupt officials. The villagers would band together, present petitions, or riot, occasionally attacking a rich merchant's storehouse or a local magistrate's office, demanding relief. You've heard of such incidents in other provinces. They're dangerous. If the shogunate troops quell the riot, they punish ringleaders with death or crucifixion. But the fact that these uprisings happen shows the desperation that can set in when people are pushed beyond their limit. In your own village's memory, maybe a generation ago there was a protest that led to the daimyo reducing the tax for a couple of years. It's a delicate dance. Protest too little and you starve. Protest too much and you get executed. So most times, peasants endure silently. It's only in the worst of times that they collectively dare to say, enough. However, this year, let's imagine no violent unrest is needed. The harvest was decent, the taxes claimed, and now it is late autumn. This is actually a moment of brief rest and perhaps celebration. Many villages hold a harvest festival, often coinciding with the Shinto shrine's annual Matsuri, or with the full moon of the 8th lunar month. After the rice is safely in, the tension lifts a bit. Your village shrine might host a small ceremony giving thanks to the kami spirits of the fields. People might dress in whatever slightly nicer clothes they have, laugh and sing a little more freely. Maybe there's a drum and flute music, and some folks perform a rice planting dance or a lion dance to entertain and honor the gods. The children get to eat some special treats, perhaps chestnuts boiled with rice, if you reserved a bit of rice for this treat, or sweet red bean paste in mochi. Adults might indulge in a cup or two of sake. It's a reward for months of labor and a spiritual appeasement to ensure the cycle continues favorably next year. You savor this celebration. It is humble, nothing like the grand festivals of the cities, but it fills you with a sense of belonging and relief. There's newly harvested rice in your bowl. New rice always tastes extra delicious, a bit sweeter from its freshness, and you actually eat until you're full, a luxury not always granted in the lean late winter time. The fields now are mostly empty, shorn of their crop. Only short stubble remains, which will later be ploughed under or burned. The weather is turning cooler day by day. Autumn also means certain chores. gathering in other crops like soybeans, sesame, or cotton, if you grow them. Perhaps you also have to collect firewood for winter, a task typically done in autumn before the snows, if you live in a region with snow. Groups of villagers go into nearby hills with pisa, permission to gather fallen branches and chop a limited number of trees. Forest resources are usually regulated by the domain or the village to prevent deforestation. You haul back bundles of wood on your back, or by ox cart if available. It's hard work, but the crackling fires of winter will depend on it. Another big event in late autumn in many areas is the payment of other taxes or rents. Besides the main rice tax, called nengu, there might be various miscellaneous taxes, maybe a textile tax if your area produces cotton or silk, or a poll tax type fee per household, or corvée labor obligations, where you might be sent for a few days to work on a lord's project, like repairing a castle moat or roads. Some lords also impose taxes in kind. Perhaps you owe a certain amount of firewood, or fish, or salt, if those are local products. The complexity can be mind-boggling. For example, historical records show categories like kuji, miscellaneous labor taxes, and tansen, land surtaxes, that lords would levy for special occasions. Often these temporary taxes became annual, making life even harder. It's no wonder that there's an old saying, life for a farmer is like a piece of mochi stretched in 5 directions, pulled apart by the demands of the lord, the village, the shrine, the temple, and nature, all at once. By autumn, you feel that stretching acutely. However, let's not let the litany of taxes overshadow the small contentment of having the harvest in. For now, your family has rice. It's a reassuring sight, clay jars filled and bags stacked in your shed. You'll eat this rice as brown rice or mixed rice mostly. You might save some to polish into white rice for festivals or when someone is sick and needs something easy to digest. Your diet in the coming months will improve a bit right after harvest, ironically, because new grain is abundant for the moment. You might even have fresh vegetables like taro, eggplants, or squash from the late summer garden, so meals are more varied. This is the time of autumn abundance, brief as it may be, and you relish it. Walking through the village on an autumn late afternoon, you observe signs of preparation for winter. Neighbors are repairing their thatch roofs, stuffing new straw into patches to keep out drafts. Some are drying persimmons on strings under the eaves to make dried fruit for winter, a sweet treat in cold months. Others are boiling soybeans to make a new batch of miso paste or soy sauce. The pleasant, savory aroma drifts through the air. Children play with the fallen leaves or chase each other, enjoying the cooler weather now that the pressure of harvest has eased. The whole community carries a subtly lighter mood. A successful harvest has a way of lifting spirits. At sunset, the sky might glow red, and the cry of migrating wild geese echoes above, heading south. You take a moment to watch them, those free birds, and perhaps envy that they can fly away, while you remain tied to this plot of earth. But you also feel pride. You did what needed to be done. Your ancestors and the local gods entrusted you with this land for another year, and you fulfilled that trust. There's rice for another year, which means life goes on. You bow silently, in thanks to the fields, the water, the sun, and then head inside as the chill of an autumn night creeps in. Tonight, your wife has made a hearty stew of root vegetables and maybe a bit of dried fish or tofu. With new rice on the side, it feels like a feast. As you eat with your family around the warm Irori hearth, you feel for once, almost content. The hardships of spring and summer are behind, and the biting trials of winter are not yet here. For this evening, at least, all is okay in your little corner of feudal Japan. Winter, cold nights and frail lives. With the harvest done and the trees bare of leaves, winter descends on your village. In many parts of Japan, winter is relatively mild, especially in the south or near the coasts. But in others, like the northern regions or mountain valleys, it can be harsh, with heavy snow and biting winds. Regardless of the exact climate, winter is universally the slowest and hardest time for peasants. The land rests, which means no crops are growing to sustain you. You must rely on what you've stored and hope it will last. The days are short, nights long, and often bitterly cold, especially in the simple dwellings you inhabit. Early winter might still have some pleasant days, crisp and sunny, which are used to finish up remaining outdoor tasks. You plow any fields that need to be turned over, spreading leftover straw or manure as fertilizer. Manure is precious. You collect animal droppings and even human waste, night soil, to compost for next year's fertility. If your village has side industries like charcoal making or tool repair, those might be in focus as late autumn transitions to winter. But once the truly cold weather sets in, a sort of semi-hibernation routine begins. There are fewer daylight hours, and on some days, the weather is simply too hostile to do much outside. It could be driving snow or icy rain, or fierce winds that cut through clothing. Inside your hut, the fire pit is kept alight as much as possible. Staying warm becomes a daily struggle. The walls of your home are thin, often just wattle, woven sticks, daubed with clay, which cracks and lets drafts in. The floor may be packed earth in parts of the house, especially the kitchen area, and maybe wooden planks or tatami mats, straw mats, in the sleeping area if you're a bit better off. There is no insulation, so the only heat source is the airori, the sunken hearth in the floor, or a small hibachi, charcoal brazier, if you have one. Keeping the fire going is vital. It's also a chore. Every morning, you coax last night's embers into flame, or if it died, you might beg some hot coals from a neighbor rather than waste flint and steel. Fuel is limited. You have the wood you gathered, plus maybe rice, straw bundles to burn. You use wood sparingly, burning just enough to cook and keep from freezing. Often the fire is allowed to die down to embers when people sleep to avoid accidents and to conserve fuel. This means by morning, the house interior is near freezing. You sometimes wake to find a thin layer of ice on the water bucket or frost on the inside of the wall. Your breath mists in the air as you stir in the early dawn darkness. Clothing in winter is layered. During the Edo period, cotton becomes more common even for peasants, especially in regions where cotton is grown. You might have a padded cotton jacket or coat called a hanten or a peasant's coat that's been lovingly made by layering old cloth and stitching it with fine lines of sashiko quilting. An example would be a thick indigo-dyed coat, perhaps made of 3 layers of worn cotton cloth reinforced together, with a simple striped pattern and many white stitches holding it together. These coats are treasured. They last years with repairs. They not only provide warmth, but also serve as heavy work garments when doing outdoor tasks in the cold. Under that, you wear your usual kimono layers, maybe an extra inner lining of hemp. Around your legs, you might wrap cloth or wear leggings. You don straw sandals if going outside, or if snow is deep, waraji sandals tied to short wooden platform shoes. kind of getter, or even basic snowshoes made of bamboo. Hands are often bare, but sometimes people use cloth wraps or straw mittens for heavy work. Nutrition tends to worsen in winter. Fresh vegetables are scarce. If your family was forward-thinking, you have some vegetables pickled, like pickled daikon, turnips, or eggplant, stored in large clay jars. The salt-preserved pickles, tsukemono, provide vitamins and were crucial to avoid diseases like scurvy. You might also have dried foods, maybe strips of dried daikon or gourd, dried persimmons, which become sweet after weeks of drying, or dried fish if you live near the coast or a lake. Commonly, villagers store sweet potatoes in a cellar or underground pit, as they keep well and saved lives during famines. The sweet potato, introduced in the 17th century, proved a godsend in bad years because it can grow in poorer soil and be harvested late. Its presence in your store could literally make the difference between hunger and starvation in midwinter. Grains are the staple. Of course, you have your sacks of rice and millet. Each day, you carefully measure out how much to cook, balancing appetites with rationing. Rice might be eaten more as a porridge in winter, to bulk up with water, or mixed with millet to stretch it. Hot soups and stews are valued, perhaps a miso soup with some tofu, seaweed, and root vegetables if available, or just a thin rice gruel flavored with salt or miso. Once in a rare while, there might be fresh meat. Hunting in winter sometimes yields a rabbit or birds. There is an interesting cultural note. Although overt meat eating of four-legged animals was religiously frowned upon, there were euphemisms and exceptions. For instance, wild boar might be called mountain whale and eaten, or venison might be dried for medicine. Some villages did quietly hunt and consume wild game, especially in winter, when crops were not an option. If your region is remote, perhaps a wild boar stew is not unheard of. But in general, fish and plant foods remain the mainstay. With the agricultural cycle paused, winter tasks revolve around survival and maintenance. One major activity is textile work. As mentioned, women, and sometimes men, spend long winter evenings spinning thread from hemp or cotton, weaving cloth on simple looms, and sewing or repairing garments. This is not just a hobby, it's essential. Clothes must be mended and made because you cannot afford to buy new clothing. Many peasants go through winter wearing clothes full of patches upon patches, a style born of necessity, later admired as boro textiles by collectors. A mother teaches her daughter to patch a sleeve while preserving every scrap of cloth because motonai, waste nothing. You might be carving new wooden tools or handles by the hearth. Perhaps you plait straw into ropes, sandals, or baskets to replace worn ones. Straw from rice harvest is saved for this purpose. The village might send some men to do corvée labor for the local lord. Winter is when lords summon peasants to repair castle walls, build roads, or do other heavy tasks, since they're not needed in the fields. It's dreaded but mandatory. You trudge off for days or weeks to labor in some work camp, sometimes in frigid conditions, with little provided in the way of food or shelter, except what you bring. These projects could be far, maybe constructing a levee or carrying supplies to the castle town. Such labor taxes are part of the yaku obligations, and they add to the strain of winter. Winter is also a time of illness and death. Respiratory diseases flourish in cold, crowded huts. A simple cold can escalate to pneumonia. With limited nutrition, people's immune systems are weak, You often hear coughing in the evenings, some elder in the family hacking away. There's no effective treatment for something like pneumonia or tuberculosis, called consumption. Many simply waste away. Childhood illnesses that didn't occur in summer might hit in winter, when people are indoors. Measles, smallpox, if it hasn't come already, whooping cough, etc. The historical record indicates that Japan was ravaged by waves of smallpox periodically, killing many children. If a smallpox epidemic comes to your village in winter, it's horrifying. Red rash, fever, children crying, and then falling silent. Families pray to their household gods or try folk remedies. Some might hang a straw rope with certain charms at the door to ward disease, or visit a shrine reputed to help with sickness. But often, all you can do is quarantine the sick as best you can, and hope. Funerals in winter are a somber reality. The ground may be frozen, making burial hard, but the bodies must be dealt with. Buddhists perform cremation if fuel allows, otherwise simple burials. The community helps, but in times of widespread sickness, each family may be on its own. One can imagine how a modern person, used to vaccines and medicine, would be shocked to see the frequency of death in a feudal village, where losing multiple children, or the mother in childbirth, or a young adult to illness, was sadly commonplace. We should talk about childbirth too. That could happen any season. But winters were especially tough on pregnant women and infants. There are no doctors in villages. Usually, maybe a midwife, with some experience, helps deliver babies. The conditions are primitive. No sterilization, little understanding of infection. Many women die in childbirth from bleeding or fever. Childbed, fever. Infants often die within days if they are weak, or if milk is insufficient. It's often said that only about half of children might survive to their teens in those times, though it varied, of course. So, a family that wants to have, say, 2 surviving children might have 4 or 5 births, expecting some losses. It's a quiet tragedy that sits in the background of peasant life. Yet, people carry on and love the children they have, making protective charms for them, taking them to shrines for blessings. Each winter, the family huddles together around the hearth, parents telling stories or folklore to the little ones to pass the long evenings. Storytelling is a key entertainment. Perhaps your grandfather recounts tales of long ago, or ghost stories that make everyone shiver more. You might hear the classic folklore about Momotaro, Peach Boy, or the tongue-cut sparrow, or local legends about yokai, spirits in the woods. These stories often carry moral lessons, or simply distract from hunger and cold. One bright spot in winter is New Year's, Oshogatsu, which is the most important festival of the year. As the year's end approaches in the lunar calendar, or by the 18th and 19th century, the officially adopted calendar, but traditionally around late January, February. Even peasants try to rest and celebrate a little. The house is cleaned. Debts, if any, are supposed to be settled by year-end, though many peasants sink into debt regardless, borrowing rice or coin to get by. If you can afford it, you make special foods, pound rice into mochi cakes, even if you saved just a little rice for this treat. Maybe prepare some dried fish or bean dishes, and offerings to the gods. The New Year's morning might see you and your family visiting the village shrine, offering thanks and prayers for a good year to come. Children get a rare treat of sweet rice wine or a sweet dumpling. It's one of the few times you might taste white rice in plenty, as ozoni rice, cake soup, or other holiday dishes. because everyone spares a bit of their store for this auspicious day. Kadomatsu pin decorations might be set at gates, even in humble form, to welcome ancestral spirits. The celebration is modest compared to samurai or merchant families, but it's deeply meaningful. It symbolizes hope and renewal. For a day or two, work is put aside. Time is taken to simply be with family, to rest, and to quietly enjoy being alive to see another year. Once New Year passes, winter drags on. By mid to late winter, February, by modern reckoning, stores of food are running low. This is the truly lean time. It's still too early for new crops, though in some areas, the first buds of wild plants might appear toward the very end of winter, which desperate folk will gather to eat. If your rice or millet is nearly gone, you survive on pickles, maybe acorn or chestnut flour dumplings, or even the inner bark of certain trees, ground up, mixed with straw to fill the belly. People grow visibly thinner. Malnutrition sets in for many, evidenced by weakness, more frequent illness, and in children, stunted growth. If it's a famine year, winter is when the death toll skyrockets. Perhaps you've heard of the Great Tenmei famine of the 1780 seconds, where countless villages lost people to starvation. In that famine, volcanic ash from an eruption and cold weather ruined harvests, and the shogunate's mismanagement compounded the misery. Stories tell of peasants eating grass and dirt just to have something in their stomach, and many selling their children or themselves into servitude in exchange for food. Some resorted to theft or violence in desperation. Your own grandparents might have lived through a lesser famine and told you how they boiled straw or shoe leather to make broth. These memories are communal nightmares. Thus, even in a normal winter, the community is on edge until the first signs of spring. Hunger is a familiar foe, always lurking. Yet, the human spirit in your village does not extinguish easily. During winter nights, people maintain social bonds. They might gather at someone's home, especially if that home has a good hearth, to talk, or even have a little music. Perhaps a villager plays the shakuhachi, bamboo flute, softly, or someone sings a folk song. These songs might be melancholy or cheerful, but often reflect acceptance of life's rhythms. Women might gather to husk millet together or sew collectively, chatting to ease the tedium. Men might repair fishing nets or tools as a group, and there's humor, dark humor sometimes, shared among peasants, jokes about the Lord's greed, or about one's own skinny horse, or the mischief of a tanuki, raccoon dog spirit, stealing persimmons. Laughter helps keep you warm as much as the fire does. When heavy snow falls, it can both beautify and burden the village. Children play in it, perhaps sliding on frozen ponds or throwing snow, their laughter echoing. Adults worry about roofs collapsing or paths being blocked. You might have to climb onto the roof to sweep off excess snow from the thatch. Travel becomes difficult or impossible. Not that peasants travel much beyond their immediate area. Normally, moving without permission is generally forbidden. You can't just wander off to a new province looking for work in this era. Winter thus shrinks your world to the immediate environs of the village. News from outside comes rarely, maybe via a passing monk or merchant braving the roads. You might hear that in the towns there's a sickness outbreak, or that taxes will increase next year, or that a distant war is brewing in earlier times. You tuck those thoughts away. Right now, surviving winter is enough focus. Finally, as all things do, winter too approaches its end. By late winter, small signs of change appear. A day comes when the wind shifts and smells a little less sharp. The ice in the paddies starts to melt. Maybe an early plum blossom buds on a bare branch, defying the cold with a tiny pink flower. These small wonders lift your heart. You have almost made it through the year's hardest part. If you still have some rice saved, you're among the lucky. If not, you're rationing day by day. But at least with spring will come new greens, edible wild herbs called sansai sprout, which peasants eagerly gather to make a bitter but life-saving early spring soup. The cycle is about to renew. You think ahead to the tasks of spring, ploughing, repairing the canal, patching the dikes, and oddly, despite the dread of hard work, you feel a bit of excitement. The life of the fields will resume, and perhaps this year will be better. On a cold March night, you sit by the fire with your family and maybe share the last of the dried sweet potato or a special rice ball, because tomorrow is First Water Day, or some local observance that marks the beginning of agricultural activities. You step outside, stars twinkle, and you breathe in the night air. It's still cold, but you sense mildness beneath it. The worst of winter's bite is over. You reflect on the months past, the hunger pangs, the sick neighbor you helped bury, the warmth of holding your child under the quilts, the stories told to keep hope alive. How many modern people could persevere through such a winter of scarcity and uncertainty? You wonder briefly, but the thought doesn't linger. It's not a concept you dwell on. This is simply life as you know it. It takes a calm endurance, a certain resignation to nature's terms, and deep communal bonds to get through. You're grateful you had those. Now, turning in for the night, you know that with dawn, spring will dawn anew, and with it, another cycle in the endless, laborious, but also life-affirming existence of a peasant in feudal Japan. The wrath of nature, when hardship turns to disaster. Through the narrative of the seasons, we've seen the everyday hardships a peasant endures, the back-breaking work, the hunger, the cold, the social burdens. As formidable as those are, there is another category of challenge that lurks largely beyond human control: natural disasters. Living in Japan's countryside, you exist at the mercy of the elements in a very immediate way. A single unfortunate event can wipe out an entire year's labor or an entire community in moments. It's a constant background worry, even if spoken of in hushed tones. Japan's landscape is both beautiful and perilous. Villages are often nestled in valleys, near rivers, for irrigation, or along the coast, for fishing, or at the base of hills. These locations expose them to floods, landslides, earthquakes, tsunamis, typhoons, and volcanic eruptions. You have likely heard frightening tales of such disasters passed down as cautionary lore. Perhaps your own great-grandparents survived one. Floods and landslides are the most frequent local disasters. In the rainy season, or during typhoons, rivers can swell rapidly. Levees, often just earthen embankments, maintained by villagers, sometimes give way. A flood at the wrong time, say in midsummer, can drown all the rice plants, turning fields into lakes. If it happens near harvest, it can wash away the crop or rot it. You might recall a year when a flash flood hit at night, the water gushing into homes. People scrambled onto roofs in the darkness, clutching babies, while livestock were swept away. Come dawn, the village paths were rivers, and several houses had collapsed. Those whose stores of rice got wet faced starvation, because once soaked, the grain molds quickly. Landslides, we call them yamatsunami, or mountain tsunami, occur when heavy rain sends whole hillsides of mud and rock sliding down. A chunk of mountainside could bury part of the village in an instant. There's an old scar on the hillside above your village. Perhaps a previous generation had a shrine there to placate the mountain god, hoping to prevent another slide. Then there are typhoons, massive tropical storms that howl in from the Pacific. Every few years, a big one strikes. The wind alone can flatten thatched roofs, uproot trees, and batter down the autumn rice ready to harvest. If a typhoon comes at harvest time, and they often do in September, it can be devastating. The winds and sideways rain knock the rice down, making it hard or impossible to reap, and much grain might sprout or spoil on the stalk. One historical account from 1831 describes a terrible typhoon that ruined crops across regions, leading to famine the following year. When the sky turns an ominous grey-green and the winds pick up, villagers try to secure whatever they can, tying down roofs with ropes, moving food stores to higher ground, penning animals. Ultimately, you take shelter and wait, listening to your home creak and praying it holds. The next day, you emerge to find the landscape littered with broken timber and maybe the bridge washed out. It can set the village back years. Earthquakes, however, are the most unpredictable terror. Japan sits on volatile tectonic plates, and tremors are not uncommon. Mostly they are small, a rattling of the rafters, a quivering of the ground underfoot, that make everyone pause, eyes wide, then sigh in relief when it stops. But sometimes, the shaking builds and builds until houses sway and people can't stand. In an era with no seismic engineering, buildings just collapse if the quake is strong enough. You've heard of or experienced quakes that toppled the stone lanterns at the shrine and cracked walls. The worst is if one strikes at night when fires are lit. Fallen lanterns or braziers spark an inferno. Large towns like Edo have had catastrophic fires triggered by quakes. In a village, a fire can still wipe out many homes before it's controlled. Everyone would form a bucket brigade, but if the well is damaged, good luck. One particularly fearsome memory in local lore might be the Hoei earthquake of 1707, if you live in the south-central Japan region. That mega-quake was said to be felt almost everywhere. The earth shook so long people couldn't keep their footing. Buildings collapsed en masse. But the worst came after. A series of gigantic tsunami waves smashed the coastline. Villages by the shore were literally swallowed by the sea, as a witness account described. Entire villages carried out to sea by a wall of water. Where there were once rice paddies and homes, the ocean roared in, then receded, leaving nothing but sand and debris. Thousands died. As if that wasn't enough, that same quake possibly triggered Mount Fuji to erupt weeks later. The eruption rained ash over vast areas, including rice fields, effectively ruining them. Ash covered Edo, Tokyo, in a layer inches thick, and closer villages were buried. The ash contaminated rivers and fields, causing starvation and disease for years after. In a pre-scientific age, villagers interpreted these as acts of angry gods or cosmic punishment. Perhaps your ancestors responded by increasing offerings to the shrine or organizing a pilgrimage to a sacred site to pray for protection. Less cataclysmic, but still deadly, are famines, which we touched upon. Famines in Japan were often multi-causal. Bad weather, maybe a volcano in a distant land causing a cold summer, plus economic factors, rice hoarding by merchants, failure of authorities to distribute relief. The result is always the same for peasants: empty bowls and death from hunger. The Tenpo famine of the 1832, for example, was triggered by consecutive years of floods and cold summers, hitting especially hard in northern regions. Rice prices soared beyond reach. People ate anything. There's records of folks in snow country eating straw-thatched roofs boiled into porridge. Government relief fell short, and hundreds of thousands perished across the country. Villages were found abandoned, the inhabitants all dead or fled. Those who survived a famine would erect memorial stones later, engravings warning future generations not to forget and to prepare. You might have seen one such stone near your village temple, listing the names of those who died in 1837, including many children. These stones stand as solemn reminders that life hung by a thin thread. A few bad harvests in a row, and even the hardiest community could be extinguished. The peasant's relationship with nature is thus double-edged. You revere it through the Shinto, belief in kami spirits of the land. You offer thanks for good harvests, but you also fear its caprice. Every time you plant a seed or build a house by the river, you trust that nature will favor you, but you know deep down it could all be swept away. Perhaps that's why many peasants develop a kind of stoic acceptance. There's an expression, shikata ga nai, it cannot be helped. After doing all you humanly can, reinforcing dikes, storing extra food, praying for good weather, in the end you acknowledge forces larger than you. If a flood comes, you mourn the losses, and then you rebuild with what you have, because what else can you do? The community steps in to help one another. For instance, if one family's home is washed away, the others all pitch in to reconstruct a new hut. We saw that when a house is needed or damaged, the village unites to build or repair it. After a disaster, those who survive share what food they have with those who lost theirs, at least until outside aid, rare, might come, or new crops can be planted. In feudal times, occasionally the central shogunate or a wealthy domain lord would open their granaries to feed the starving, especially if they feared revolt. But often, help was too little or too late. So villages learned to be self-reliant in crisis. A proverb goes, "Fall 7 times, stand up 8." Indeed, after each blow, peasants somehow found a way to carry on. You might picture one particularly stark scenario, a tsunami. Though less frequent than seasonal disasters, tsunamis have struck Japanese coasts repeatedly. Imagine you are a fishing village peasant on a small bay. One chilly evening, the ground trembles, a large offshore quake. You and your neighbors are startled, but before you grasp what happened, someone yells that the tide is strangely receding. The shoreline bares itself, fish flopping on the suddenly exposed seabed. An elder who remembers lore of the past screams, "Run to high ground." Pandemonium ensues as villagers scramble up the nearest hill. Minutes later, a roaring wall of water appears, a tsunami. It crashes onto the shore, engulfing the village. Houses, boats, people who didn't make it in time, all are swept up in a churning flood. A historical account from 1707 says waves up to 10 meters hit parts of Shikoku and Kii provinces, sweeping away every house in some coastal villages. The death toll was huge. If you survive such an ordeal, you come down to find essentially nothing recognizable left. It's a full reset of life. You'd rely on neighbors inland for refuge while trying to rebuild from scratch. Some might decide to leave and join relatives elsewhere, but travel restrictions could complicate that. Most would stay and reconstruct the community with grim determination. In the face of all this, How do you maintain sanity and hope? One way is spiritual faith. Almost every village has both a Shinto shrine for local nature deities and a Buddhist temple for prayer, memorials, and teachings. You regularly partake in rituals, a spring ceremony to appease the water god, a summer prayer to ward off storms, an autumn thanksgiving for the harvest, and so on. When disasters strike, those who survive gather at these sacred places to pray for the lost and to seek strength to move on. Buddhism, in particular, offers the concept of impermanence. Muya, all things, good or bad, eventually pass. This aligns with what you see. Seasons change, lives end and begin, fortunes rise and fall. A peasant might chant Namu Amida Butsu in Pure Land Buddhist tradition, hoping for a better rebirth, or simply as a comfort that Buddha's compassion is with them even in suffering. Shinto, on the other hand, encourages purification and making peace with the spirits. Maybe the land's kami was angered, so you perform rites to pacify it. It's not that you expect miracles, but these practices give a framework to process tragedy. There is also a communal coping. Storytelling plays a role. After a disaster, tales will be told of it, partly to vent the trauma and partly as lessons. Remember the flood of Tenmei 4, elders might say, and then recount how those who climbed the big camphor tree survived. So always note the nearest sturdy high ground. Or, the earthquake of Ansei split the ground open, so they pass on tips like, avoid building on certain soil. These accounts become local folklore. Over time, some get embellished with supernatural elements, a giant catfish in the earth causing quakes, an old Japanese belief, or a dragon king showing mercy by stopping a flood. These narratives make sense of the senseless, giving you something to latch onto. From a modern perspective, one realizes how resilient these peasants had to be. The fact that villages persisted for centuries in such a hazard-prone land speaks to their adaptive strategies and mental fortitude, but it also underscores how precarious life was. Today, we have weather forecasts, earthquake-resistant buildings, disaster relief. A feudal peasant had none of that. They lived with a constant low-level anxiety that any day, nature could deal an awful hand. And when it did, they would likely have no recourse but to endure or perish. So, if you were a peasant in feudal Japan, not only would you labor tirelessly and live modestly, you'd also carry in your heart a kind of humble respect for nature's power. Each day, without calamity, is a good day. Each harvest safely gathered is a blessing. You might not articulate it in grand terms, but you'd feel it. A successful life is one where you and your family can weather the literal and figurative storms and come out alive on the other side. Many could not. Survival itself was an achievement. As we move towards concluding this journey through a peasant's world, keep in mind this ever-present shadow of nature's wrath. It is perhaps the final and most formidable reason why someone used to modern conveniences wouldn't last a day in that era. Because even if you summoned the strength to plow and carry and bow to lords, could you also live under the daily possibility that fire, earth, water, or wind might suddenly destroy all you know? It takes a mental toughness and acceptance forged by lifelong proximity to these realities. Feudal Japanese peasants had it. Do we? Conclusion: a life of perseverance and humility. We have traveled through the year in the life of a feudal Japanese peasant, from the hopeful labors of spring, the sweat and growth of summer, the urgent toil and burdens of autumn, to the cold challenges of winter, punctuated by the ever-looming threat of natural calamities. It has been an immersive glimpse into a world that is profoundly different from modern life. Now, as we conclude, let's step back and reflect calmly on what this life means and why, truly, you wouldn't last a day as a peasant in feudal Japan, at least not without a complete transformation of expectations and endurance. The most striking impression is one of unceasing labor. From before dawn to after dusk, almost every waking moment of a peasant's life involved work or essential chores. Leisure was a rare luxury, perhaps a few festival days a year, or a snatched moment of rest when absolutely nothing else was urgent. Compare that to modern life, where we expect downtime, weekends, and entertainment. A single day of rice transplanting, bent over in knee-deep water under a hot sun, would leave most of us today utterly exhausted and in pain. For the peasant, that was just one of many similar days, and complaining about it was as pointless as complaining that water is wet. It had to be done, or you wouldn't eat. The physical fitness and pain tolerance developed by these people from childhood is hard for us to fathom. By age 12 or so, a peasant boy or girl could likely do more continuous hard labor than many modern adults ever do in their lives. Their hands were calloused, their backs bent, their muscles hardened by necessity. If we were suddenly dropped into that life, our bodies would rebel. Blisters, sunburn, back pain, dehydration, malnutrition. It would feel like torture. And yet they carried on calmly, day after day. Then consider the scarcity in diet. We live in an age of supermarkets and year-round plenty for many. A minor skipped meal feels uncomfortable to us, but a peasant's stomach was frequently neither full nor satisfied with rich flavors. The diet was repetitive and often deficient in certain nutrients. Many modern people would find it astonishing to eat millet gruel for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, with maybe a pickled vegetable as the sole garnish. Meat, sweets, or fruits were almost non-existent treats. Hunger, in a mild form, was a near constant companion. You ate until your belly felt not empty, but rarely until you felt truly full, except after harvest. And in bad years, true hunger, as in the pain of an empty stomach for days, was reality. We must remember how close to the edge of starvation these communities often lived. A tax increase or a crop failure could push them from just getting by into a deadly famine. The mental stress of that insecurity is hard to grasp if you've never wondered where your next meal will come from. Peasants had to cultivate a kind of Zen acceptance of whatever they had. If acorn porridge is what's there, that is what you eat. To us, such fare might seem barely palatable. To them, it was life-saving sustenance. The lack of freedom and harsh social rules are another factor. Today, we cherish personal freedom to travel, to change jobs, to speak our minds. A feudal peasant had virtually none of those freedoms. You were usually legally bound to your village. Travel papers were required to go any significant distance, and unauthorized departure was a crime. Your occupation was fixed at birth. You would be a farmer like your parents, period. Your daily script was largely written by obligations. Obey the Lord's laws, pay the taxes, do the village collective work, follow the centuries-old customs. If a samurai demanded your help or insulted you, you bowed and complied, or risked being cut down. If your lord decreed an extra labor tax, you did it, or your family might face ruin. Modern sensibilities would chafe under such constant subservience. The peasants themselves sometimes did. hence the uprisings and petitions. But mostly they lived within an ingrained culture of hierarchy and humility. They found dignity not in individual liberty, which was unattainable, but in fulfilling their role honorably and sustaining their community. A Western observer or a modern person might think, how oppressive, how did they bear it? But for them, that was simply the order of the world, reinforced by religion and tradition. Neo-Confucian ethics preached, everyone should stay in their station for harmony. It took a mental conditioning from birth to accept it. We, without that conditioning, would likely feel anger, frustration, and despair at the lack of personal agency. Moreover, health and lifespan. The average life expectancy might have been around 30 to 50 years, accounting for high infant mortality. If you survived childhood, perhaps you could reach your 60 seconds, but many would succumb before that to disease, injury, or childbirth complications. Nearly every family lost children. Nearly every person lost siblings or friends at young ages. Death was a frequent visitor. Modern people are shielded from death. Many of us reach adulthood without experiencing the death of someone close. A peasant child might see a sibling die in infancy, a mother die giving birth, or a neighbor die of illness, all before they were teenagers. One had to develop a psychological resilience to keep going amid frequent bereavement. They found solace in community and religion, and in a worldview that accepted death as part of the natural cycle. Still, imagine someone from today who expects modern medical care, being told there is none, that if you get pneumonia, your family will just wrap you in blankets and hope you survive. Or if you break a leg badly, you might be crippled for life because there's no surgery. It would be terrifying. Peasants lived with that uncertainty daily and bore it with remarkable stoicism. And finally, the constant dance with nature's fury, as we detailed. How many of us have ever truly feared a famine or watched our home wash away in a flood? Those experiences sear the soul. If you transplanted a modern individual into such a calamity without their usual support systems, would they cope? Perhaps not easily. Feudal peasants, by necessity, were psychologically prepared from early on that disasters can happen and life can turn upside down in an instant. It bred a sort of collective endurance. They rebuilt and recovered because there was no alternative. They learned virtues of patience, cooperation, and hope against odds. When modern folks face long power outages or temporary shortages, it's often met with high anxiety. For a peasant, that was simply a lesser inconvenience compared to, say, a year of failed crops. In sum, a day as a peasant in feudal Japan is not just physically exhausting, it's an entire mindset, an existence alien to us. It requires a calm fortitude, an acceptance of hardship, and an absence of the luxuries material and social we take for granted. The peasant's world was grounded in community, routine, and humility. Joy was found in small things: a good harvest, a healthy newborn, a warm fire, the sound of villagers singing at a festival. These are modest joys, but perhaps more profound because they were hard-won. As you drift out of this historical reverie, picture one last scene. A peasant family at dusk, after a long day. Let's say in late spring. The father is mending a rake by lamplight. The mother is nursing a baby while stirring a pot of millet soup. An old grandmother croons a folk song, clapping softly to amuse a toddler. The hut is poor, the floor dirt, the smells smoky and earthy. Outside, frogs chirp in the rice fields. The family is tired, faces lined with toil, but in that moment they have a kind of peace. They have each other. They have survived another day, and tomorrow's sunrise will call them to work again. There is no question of, what shall we do tomorrow, or who shall we be? It is predetermined. They will farm. They will endure. There is a serenity in that certainty, however harsh. This calm, repetitive, tightly bounded life might even lull one into a sort of meditative state, much like a sleep story, where the world is reduced to elemental tasks and nature's sounds. But make no mistake, achieving even that serenity meant carrying a burden most of us today would find unbearable after a short time. You wouldn't last a day is not to insult the modern individual's strength. It's to highlight just how heroically resilient these ordinary peasants were. What was normal to them would be extreme to us. It invites a sense of awe and gratitude. Awe for our ancestors' endurance. Gratitude that we live in a time and circumstance where we are not tested in all the same ways. Perhaps by understanding their lives, we gain perspective on our own. Many things we stress over would seem trivial to someone who worried about having enough millet to feed their child through winter. In the gentle closing of this journey, let's appreciate the paradox. While we likely couldn't survive their life easily, they found ways to live and even find contentment within it. The human spirit, when nurtured by community and purpose, can withstand an astonishing amount. It leaves one with a calm respect for those nameless millions of Japanese peasants who, through sweat and sorrow, quietly built the foundations of a nation's prosperity with their rice and their perseverance. So next time you enjoy a bowl of rice or complain about a hard day at work, you might recall this story and whisper a thank you to those hardy souls of the past, and then be glad that after a long day you can relax, whereas they would be lacing up their straw sandals at dawn to face yet another unforgiving day with stoic resolve. In the end, their lives were harder than we can easily imagine, yet imbued with a certain rhythm and purpose that carried them through. It's a life best left in the history books, perhaps, but one always worth remembering with empathy and respect.